Okay, now we're recording. Alex, welcome back to the Quadcast. For all those who don't know, Alex is a rowing coach. He's currently studying to get his CSCS. For those who don't know, that's your Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist. It's kind of like a big deal. So a big flex on Alex for wanting to pursue that. Some of us have it already, and it was really hard. The test was really hard. I cannot emphasize this enough. The test was really hard, but they've made
With
change.
numbers.
They've made changes to the test. Apparently, they make it easier. So I'm excited about that, and Alex gets to experience that easierness, if you will, as far as the test. But I want to bring Alex on today to talk to him about what he's learning in the book to what's like relating practically in his coaching practice and how that applies. So Alex, if you want, you can give a quick rundown and introduction of yourself, and then I'm not gonna rapid fire, but I'm going to shoot some questions at you.
Yeah, I started rowing back in like 2017 in college. Hadn't done rowing before that. Fell in love with the sport. Started coaching just like during COVID. Been coaching pretty much ever since. So that's 5, 6 years now.
Mm, mm.
Um, but yeah, and then I recently moved to Canada to kind of run my own club as a head coach, which has been pretty cool. But yeah, I've kind of just been trying to expand on, certain things. John and I, we discussed back last April, it was that, maybe I should try and get the CSCS course, right? Which would help me like get private clients and things like that. And, it's just been really helpful of just understanding kind of the whole athletic world, not just this isolated rowing part. Because, rowing is one of those niche sports. And lots of coaches just copy other coaches. And instead of kind of maybe using like what they learned in a book, like they don't always have like these super detailed backgrounds from school, right? Um, so it's always learning. It's fun to learn the why, and also learn new stuff that like, with rowing, like I don't need to know that much about lifting. It doesn't have the largest lifting component. So it's been like kind of expanding and really pushing me, which is just making me an overall better rowing coach and just athletic coach. So yeah,
We like that over here.
yeah,
So I would say since you're becoming a better overall coach and top of being a rowing coach, want to ask based off either your learning from the CSS or
yeah.
from your coaching as rowing. And remember, we have both. Our listeners can be both Gen Pop, like weekend warrior kind of types, and or people who are trying to maybe succeed at the highest level. You can speak to either audience and or both. What would be something you'd want to teach them? What could be something that could help improve their knowledge or help them move their dial in the right direction?
think it's this might be I remember this term from like applying to universities back when I was 18, but it's like holistic approach, right?
Okay.
Of this, just basically don't turn every stone, right? And I think that's what the CSCS has really helped me with, because with rowing, it's like, oh, well, maybe that's their athletic limits, right? That's their genetic limit. And I'm like, really, is 80% of Olympian really just their limit? That just doesn't seem right. Like, there, I feel like there's more. You can get closer, right? Especially with the amount of work they're doing. And so it's really interesting of just like, yeah, like there's a certain lifting component to rowing. There's plyometrics that you can still do for rowing, right? These are things that I have not seen in rowing that I'm learning from the CSCS that could totally apply, and you can get competitive advantages. Because if you just copy everybody else, then it's going to be who has the better athletes, just overall, right? So doing stuff differently will get you ahead. So, yeah, just kind of like always just looking at, the whole picture, not just like specific rowing things. Because obviously, like, when you study for the CSCS, they're going to talk a lot about specificity. It's really important, right? But in terms of, just seeing like, okay, like let's try this, like maybe we should push this or whatever. Have we tried this? Like, like John and I worked together on the training plan. And like there's stuff that like we'll talk about and we don't always take, use it. Like with like the Carbone formula, right? Like, but we talk about it and it's a conversation. And like without the CSCS, without having that overall understanding of what it takes to make all athletes better, um, we wouldn't have those conversations. So and I think that's good for Gen Pop, weekend warriors, and it's good for high performance athletes, right? Because, we all just want to get fitter, right? We all just want to get that little bit of a, rush of, oh yeah, we're good at this.
So it sounds like what you're saying right now, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially what you're saying is where there's a will, there's a way. There's un overturn or like look under every stone. Like if you're stuck, if you're not seeing the progress you want to see, there is a solution. It's out there somewhere. You just have to know where to go to find it. And if you don't know where to go, start looking.
Yeah. If you're only a rowing coach, like, and I say that with the utmost respect to all my rowing coaches, like if you only look at rowing problems and rowing solutions, you won't find the answer, right? But
Mm.
looking everywhere, looking at nutrition, looking at recovery, looking at different ways to build training plans, different lifting techniques, right? Looking at other sports that are also 6 to 8 minutes of work, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's what kind of like can really help. And you're not going to see as many plateaus as a lot of coaches do. Because, especially with your older athletes or athletes that are doing crazy volume, you see these plateaus, and plateau is the worst thing that can happen for an athlete, right? Um, it happens way too early for some athletes because some coaches are just a little too single-minded on just their sport, right? And what makes fast people in their sport happen. So,
That makes sense. Next, I wanted to ask you, as far as like your learning from like the CSCS and to like your rowing coaching, is there information that feels new? And then on the other side, is there information that kind of feels like redundant?
it's interesting because like we talked about that sort of question before we hit record. And since I've been just thinking about it, and like I think the CSCS course is it's it's a little not great for cardio sport background athletes in terms of like they're going into it, right? Like it's still great overall. But like, it's definitely tailored more to people that maybe are, in the bodybuilding and then, okay, yeah, they understand the gym and now they just have to understand the science and maybe athletic performance versus looking good in the gym.
Right, right.
Um, or maybe they're baseball, American football, basketball athletes, right? And that's their background or their coaches in that background, and then they're learning, right, where they've done all this. And so there's a little bit of cardio component, which like, oh yeah, capillary density, stroke volume. These are things that I already know from like the cardio element, but a lot of the other stuff that rowing doesn't need is completely new to me. And
Mm,
so learning all that versus, maybe someone coming from a background where you do have to spend a lot of time in a gym, like it's going to be a lot more repetitive. But then the cardio element is going to be like, wait, what? And also I think that, even though there's some good stuff, there's also some stuff that I'm like, wait, really? Are you sure? Like, because how it's written is like, I don't know if the CSCS really focuses on super cardio athletes, right? Like your Grand Tour cyclists, your rowers, things like that. And it's like, well, I'm not really gonna do that. I'm not gonna do the Carbone formula on an athlete that's doing 3 hours of steady state. That's maybe gonna be a little too much. He laughs because that's what he has to do. Sucker. You chose this. You could have stayed with lifting. You could have done your lifting, but you decide, you know what? No, I want to hurt for 3 hours.
I
You
did pick
you
that.
brought this on yourself, my friend.
I did pick that.
Um, but yeah, so that's kind of like, it's very like where your background comes from, like how you approach the CSCS. Someone's going to feel like really overwhelming. Um, but then also with the stuff that isn't overwhelming, you're going to also question. Whilst other stuff, like it's going to feel like, oh yeah, that's a lot of crossover, but then you're maybe going to learn maybe not the best stuff, which just starts the question of like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't fully listen to them about the stuff that I don't know. Maybe I should investigate if that's completely still correct. I remember you and I talked about like 8 rep max, right? Like
Mhm.
80%, eight to 12 is really good for hypertrophy, right? And so and then we talked about technical failure. So 8 rep max in the book for the CSCS book is 80% of your 1 rep max, right?
Mhm.
But we've talked about that and you're like, bitch, that's too high.
It's too high.
So,
It's too high.
um, but that's what the book says, right? But like if I was someone who didn't have you in my life, right?
Mhm.
That sounds really romantic and I mean that, by the way. But anyway, if I didn't have you, kind of telling me that stuff, I would have just done that. And I'd be like, well, why are you guys sucking at this?
Just putting people in the
My book tells me
dirt.
that you should be able to handle this, so you just a
Putting
bitch.
people in the dirt. So the CSCS gets pretty in depth into lifting about what's happening like at the cellular level, as far as like the contractile unit of the cell, and like it's the sarcomere and the Z lines and the tryptomyosin, actin, myosin filament, so on and so forth,
Yeah.
and how all that's happening. Now, to date, no one has. I've talked about it in my training sessions. No one asked me about it. I'm like, I'm really glad you asked. Let me get real scientific for you. And then people will be like, oh, John, I don't need to learn it. I'm annoyed now that you're talking about the contractile unit of the cell. Have has have you had to talk about anything happening at the cellular level when explaining stuff to your people? Like, has that ever happened to you or for you?
I mean, it's good to know, right? Like it's interesting. Like I don't talk about like the the sarcomere or the calcium binding to the troponin or acetylcholine kind of being the guiding your grandma down from your brain to your muscle, like all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't do this. Now, if I did, I'd sound super smart and it's like, yeah, that's why you're paying me like $300 a month, dude. Because I know this shit, So like if it's just to like flex on your clients and stuff, like you understand this stuff, then like that's dope. But you will talk about like capillary density, you know,
Mhm. Okay, okay.
um, because a lot of people believe that interval training is the best way to improve your VO2 max. And it's just like, well, actually like all this stuff, right? So it's just, it's actually good to know. Like I was pissed when I first read the book and I'm seeing all these words I've never fucking read. I didn't even know how to pronounce them, right? It's only because I bought a course with the guy pronouncing this shit that I actually know how these sound, right? Um, and I was just like, man, I'm never going to pass this course. And I may never do. I still haven't taken the test. I'm still in training, right? But like, like when I was like, oh my God, this is completely new to me. John, why did you recommend this? Why couldn't I have just done like a normal personal training course? Um,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, sorry. That's just funny to me. Continue as you
yeah,
are.
yeah. So anyway, but yeah, no, but it's really helpful to know because it's like, yeah, like there's a reason why, like, our bodies say it's enough, right? Like, like when we lift a lot and we can't lift anymore, it's our Golgi tendon organ, right? Kind
Hmm.
of stopping us, like basically saying, like, no, your muscle's trying to protect itself, right? And these things are kind of cool to know and you understand them a little bit better. Or like, okay, so it talks a lot about resistance training, reduces mitochondrial density, but that doesn't mean that you're getting slower, right? From a cardio perspective, because it doesn't mean it's the opposite because cardio work increases mitochondrial density. It just means that like your potential is growing, right?
That's a good way to say it.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? And it's like, so yeah, okay, yeah, you're getting less mitochondrial density, but that means you also, like, if you have bigger muscles, you can get more, right? And then you're gonna be like even more of a monster, right? And so like, even though it's not saying that specifically, like knowing this stuff is really just like expanding your knowledge where you're not just repeating something, you're actually understanding it. And I like that, like because it's just everyone can say like, oh yeah, but steady state increases capillary density. And it's like, okay, yeah, but so what? Like why? And then it's like, you need to like it's good to have this whole like understanding and approach and all this, thing to kind of help you, you know.
So that's really
So
cool. Essentially, what you just said is you can go from parroting something someone's told you to understanding the mechanisms. That's kind of pretty cool.
yeah. So you
Yeah.
may hate it, but like it makes sense, right? Like as much as, I remember one thing that kind of sucks is the levers, right? When you first learn levers in the CSCS exam, you're going to be so mad, right? But then when you learn that the only thing they're going to test you on is one first class lever and one second class lever and everything else is third class, you're like, oh, okay, no, that's easy now. Like literally the answer is third class unless it says tricep or calf raise in its second class.
Fair is
Not
fair.
so for but what also was funny is like I asked someone to help me with like he's an engineer and I was like, can you please explain levers to me because this makes no sense? And he was like, yeah, in what context? And I was like, biomechanics, right? Here's like, how the and it's like, please explain this to me. He looks at it and he's like maybe I can't quite say that. Um, anyway, but anyway, so he and it's because like it's just like kind of not exactly engineering, but like also it just depends on how like you see where the pivot point is, where the muscle resistance is, where the load is, and it's like, oh yeah, so your bicep is a third class lever because actually the load is here. Well, the pivot point is here, right? So it's on this side, So it's like all this stuff. So um yeah, it's kind of just, one of those things. Yeah. So, it's just one of those things of like understanding, like certain things, but also understanding that don't just take it for word. And, there is going to be like, you're not going to have to explain levers to an athlete and what a second class, third class is. But you are going to understand is like, why can I do a lot more with my calf? It's because you have a lot of mechanical advantage, right? Or why is this really lanky kid, right, struggling to lift as much as the really short kid? Well, it's because he has long resistance on, right? And it's like that's when it actually starts to make sense. So applying all this like weird terminology to your like actual life is going to really just nail it down. And I'm not going to say like that means you're going to pass the exam, but at least it will make your CSCS thing worth it for your actual coaching.
I think that's a good point because I've never had to explain different levers. I have had to explain mechanical advantage.
Yeah.
So once again, applying what you're learning to the situation. That's a very good coach of you, good sir. I'm proud of you. You're doing good stuff. I promise you a shorter episode today, good sir. So I would like to cap it here. I did want to ask you, what would you like to call your episode? Because that's my theme on the Quadcast. I get to ask you what you would like the episode to be.
Uh, okay, so let's think about this. Uh, See, I'm trying to think of something funny, but I'm just not funny enough. So CSCS with a rowing coach. I don't know. Like, we could be really basic with this. I think, if I was like, especially doing my whole CSCS like guidance, right? I've like needed help, like of people explaining to me. Just reading the book isn't enough for me. So, labeling as CSCS would be, um, or just like rowing and CSCS, how they work together. Uh, you know,
How they
it's
work
not
together.
funny, but it's okay. Credit, shout out to all the comedians that can think of jokes as quickly as they do.
I'll have both those titles down. I'll weigh them out. I'll see which one I'll go with.
There you
Fair?
go. That's
Fair.
fair. Yeah.
Well,
All right, man.
thank you, good sir, for joining this episode, and I'll stop this recording now.